Hey, folks, this is a very special episode for Dave and myself. This Obstructed Views is our 50th episode since we decided to start doing this little podcast. We just want to let everybody know how much we appreciate your support and watching these episodes and sticking through. Thick and thin, interesting and boring. We really appreciate you coming along on the ride with us. And
And
hey,
there's 50 more coming.
here's the 50 more, right? And hey, 50 episodes. That's two whole cases of beer.
It's true.
So cheers, guys. Here's the 50 more. Welcome, everyone, to Stadium Journeys Obstructed Views, the show where a couple of guys in a couple of countries have a couple of beers and discuss the stadium somewhere in the world and their experiences there. I'm Paul.
And I'm Dave.
We're excited to be here with you tonight. Before we get started, please make sure to subscribe to the Stadium Journey YouTube page. Like the video, even if you don't really like it anyway. Leave a comment, like, share, follow, all that good stuff. Check out stadiumjourney.com for all of our fantastic our fantastic content. We are rusty. So let's get rolling, Dave. What are you drinking today?
Okay, so it being like rusty, being rusty, and
I have a
kind
rusty beer.
of summerish, I needed something a little lighter, and went to the fridge, and my fridge is like I got one of this and one of that and one of this and one of that and one of that and one of that, and I have no idea where any of it came from.
Magic fridge.
Yeah, so I had to find like the lightest thing I found, and I found this from one of my go-to places, which is in Bracebridge, Ontario, Muskoka Brewery, and I have a Tread Lightly light lager, and it's just like it sounds. It's a lager, and it's light, and it's totally a Paul Baker summer beer. Sans the blueberries. What do you got?
I don't always drink a blueberry beer. I do enjoy one. All right, so I went the exact opposite of you. Back this past winter, we had a very strange winter here in New England. It really didn't get very cold very often. There was, however, one day where it got insanely cold, and I think it was like 8 below zero or something. I picked that day to go up to Hanover, New Hampshire. Of course, I went and covered a couple Dartmouth games for Stadium Journey. Hanover, New Hampshire is up in the mountains on the New Hampshire-Vermont border. While I was up there, I said, you know what? I'm up here, new area. Let me hit a couple of new breweries. And everybody I asked up in that area said, what's the best local beer that I've got to pick up? And almost every single person said, go to River Roost Brewery in Hartford, Vermont, right across the river from Dartmouth College, and pick up a Mas Verde. So for those of you who don't speak Spanish, Mas Verde, more green. It's in Vermont, makes sense, right? This is actually an IPA. So you went with a light summer beer. I went with a heavy IPA. I'm not normally an IPA fan, but when they're done well, they're done well. And this is an excellent IPA. The folks of the Upper Valley, Upper Connecticut River Valley, did not steer me wrong. It's an excellent beer. So Mas Verde IPA. If we were visiting today's destination, we might be drinking a Wizard Fight from Corridor Brewing in Chicago, Illinois, because today we're talking about Wrigley Field, home of the Chicago Cubs. Before we dive into our conversation, let's take a look at the Stadium Vitals. Okay, so Wrigley Field, if you're talking to people who are ballpark travelers, especially on the major league circuit, everybody will discuss their favorites and their least favorites and the positives and the negatives, but two ballparks always seem to be put into a separate category. And those would be probably the two oldest ballparks, Fenway Park and our subject today, Wrigley Field. So, Dave, does Wrigley Field deserve to be in a category all its own, or should it be lumped in with everybody else?
I think it definitely needs to be in that category along with Fenway, because in some senses you give it a pass for certain things. As you know, Fenway, not my favorite.
Not your favorite at all.
Not my favorite. Wrigley, not my favorite. I get it. I understand it. The historical factor, I totally get it. There's just one big piece that I just can't take. And that's the name of our podcast, and it's Obstructed Views. There's just, for me, too many obstructed views.
I thought you were going to mention the troughs in the bathrooms.
Oh, geez. I didn't even remember that. But I will say this, like, when I hear Wrigley Field, more than any other ballpark, I see a picture, right? And it's probably because it's been done so many times in movies. So you see the iconic pieces, you see the sign out front at the corner of Clark and Addison.
Yes.
You see the ivy, which I just learned today, planted by Bill Veeck, like the Veeck,
Yes.
Veeck as in wreck, the former owner of the Indians and the White Sox, and the mastermind behind Disco Demolition Night. Yeah, he's the brains behind the ivy. He actually saw it at a park in Indianapolis and thought it was the coolest thing. And he was really young. He was the son of the president of the Cubs at the time, and decided to plant the ivy, and he did. But that's another one of those things. Rooftop seats out past the ballpark, the bleacher creatures. I see all those things, and I probably also see Ferris Bueller and Cameron doing their line. It's just like it's one of those movie parks, right? You got Fenway, you got Wrigley, you got Yankee Stadium. I'm not sure if there's any other really kind of iconic ballparks where you're going into that park in the movie. Not like the Natural, where it was filmed in certain places and they never really tell you where it was.
Mm-hmm.
But like in Ferris Bueller, he's at a Cubs game.
True. And why was Cameron wearing a Detroit Red Wings jersey in that movie? Never quite understood that.
I think Cameron was just one of those guys who like to be different. And it was Gordie Howe, like Mr. Hockey.
I don't know, but in Chicago, I don't know. Not so many
That's
people
very
running
true.
around. Not many people in Chicago run around wearing Gordie Howe jerseys, but we digress. All right, so all right, I know those of you who are faithful listeners of this podcast, I'm from Massachusetts and I'm a lifelong Red Sox fan. You're probably expecting me to crap all over Wrigley Field. Well, sorry, I'm not gonna. I've got kind of a unique take on Wrigley because I've been there twice. Once in 2011, before they did all the renovations, the 1060 project, I believe it was called.
Mm-hmm.
And then once in 2022. So I went before and after. When I first went, I thought Wrigley was an absolute dump. Hated it. The seats weren't numbered in order. We actually, it's the only ballpark I've ever sat in the wrong seat. Because the numbers, like the odd numbers went to this side of the aisle, the even numbers went to this side of the aisle.
Right.
So we got to our row and went this way, and we should have went that way. And like you said, obstructed views, the most disgusting bathroom I've ever seen in a major league park. Troughs, to pee in troughs, that gives me PTSD from my younger days having to pee in troughs.
Yeah, I'm not big on the troughs myself.
No, me neither. I haven't gotten over the PTSD there. Really, I found it really dirty and dingy, and nothing aside from the historical parts of it, nothing stood out to me. Then I went back in 2022. It was almost like it was an entirely different ballpark. The renovations, and sit down Red Sox fans, I think they did a better job with their renovations than Fenway did with theirs. The concourse, like I said, when I first went there, was dingy and dark and cruddy. Bright, shiny, clean. The inside of the parks had its, the new scoreboards and stuff, and the new shiny features were there, but it didn't really take away from the historic aspects of the ballpark. There was still enough of those old touches to supplement the new touches. If you're one of the people who own the houses across the way there where the rooftop seats are, you're not happy because all those new scoreboards block the views from those places. But
Yeah, it's
Um,
quite a controversy putting those up.
yes, yeah,
And
I'm sure we'll get into that.
yeah, definitely not a smooth renovation.
No, no, a lot of fighting over putting those scoreboards up because for those of you who haven't been to Wrigley, there are people who live. I don't know what the name of the street is, but the street that travels behind the outfield, behind center and right field, across the street, there are houses that have been there probably as long as the ballpark. The ballpark's 100 years old. The houses are probably older. But anyway, people realize from the top of their houses, they can see into Wrigley Field. So some of them, in a very entrepreneurial way, have put their own bleachers up on top of the roofs of their houses. So you can buy tickets.
Sheffield
Sheffield.
Ave.
Thank you. And so you can buy tickets. If you can't get a ticket to the game, you can get a ticket across the street and still watch the game. So when the Cubs decided they were going to put up brand new giant video boards and electronic scoreboards, some of those were blocking the views from those rooftop bleachers. So I believe some kind of compromises were put in, but the new scoreboards did block some of the views. So,
And that's a feature that's been copied in a lot of parks, right? Where they'll have to. I know, like Toledo, they had to incorporate an old building. So what did they do? They put seats on top of it and made it like kind of Wrigley-esque rooftop seating. We kind of maligned St. Louis for kind of picking parts of all these different parks and not really doing anything original. And one of the things they did is they made some rooftop seating, not outside the park, but inside the park. And yeah, it's one of those iconic things. I would say, Wrigley, I've been 3 times. 2 times I had a wonderful time. One time I had a horrible time. And it's actually kind of the opposite of your experiences. The first 2 times I had nice seats, I had a nice day. It was really good. Last time it was not a nice day. I had the post in my view, and like Fenway, it's an intimidating ballpark when it comes to buying those seats. Which seats am I going to be behind a post or am I not going to be behind a post? Like it would take me, if I'm going to buy tickets to, I'm not going to say the Blue Jays because, I've been there so many times that you kind of know it. But if I'm going to buy like wherever, take your pick, Coors Field, Comerica, whatever, I might spend a fraction of the time I would take to buy tickets at Fenway or at Wrigley. And added to that, like not only am I worrying about where the posts are, I'm having to manage that with the cost. Because let's face it, Wrigley is one of the most expensive experiences in Major League Baseball.
yeah, not just tickets, parking, because
oh my gosh, parking. Who would drive there?
Older parks, yeah. Oh, I drove there. My second time I drove there. First time we took the L in. And we happened to go there on Ron Santo night when they were dedicating his statue, which originally wasn't where it is now. We can talk about that in a minute. So we got off the subway and stepped right into this throng of people because we got off right as they were dedicating his statue. And we're like, what the heck's going on? We can't move. The second time we drove in, spent like $40 to park. We actually drove around a couple times because we actually drove all the way up to the park. Like, well, we can't park this close. Then kind of backtracked a little, got in this little parking lot, and then proceeded to get blocked in a parking lot that said, we don't block. So then, of course, we had to wait for everybody to come out after us and unblock us.
Right.
But yeah, the neighborhood was another thing. Wrigleyville, one of the legendary Major League neighborhoods, no doubt about it.
Yeah, organic, right? It sprouted on its own, sort of. It definitely did sprout on its own. With the renovation came I mean it's not a battery like in Atlanta.
No.
But there are aspects. There are hotels there now that are owned by the Cubs. There's that whole what do they call it? Shoot, I had Gallagher Way. Way. Big a gathering area, which is great. But they'll do concerts and other things there. Control that. Big, huge team store.
Yes.
Talk about like Wrigley to me, and I'm not sure if Boston was like this. Wrigley was almost like Yankee Stadium in that if you were going to buy stuff, you're better off going across the road to the
The
private
independent,
sports
yes.
store guy
Yep.
than coming into the park, right? And with the ginormous team store like everybody else has is now a part of that. Um, I would say, and I don't know if you've done this, Wrigley Field, probably one of the better tours that I've done. We did it on a Sunday. There's actually a group that has church services in the summer. Like every Sunday, they have a mass in the like in the grandstand. Not It's not huge. Like it's not like they're taking up the whole stadium, and you do your tour around it or whatever. And I thought that was really kind of neat.
Might be the only way to ever get me to go to church.
But I'm not sure if it's the first time I went. It felt really, and this was what like '03, and it felt really old time. One of the things that we had was there was like a Dixieland trio, and they would go, three old guys or whatever, and they would go with their, I think one was a clarinet and a saxophone and something else. Anyway, they would go from section to section and play a little tune, kind of in like that. I call it an outside concourse, where you got like the ring, you get the ring around, where you can walk, and there's nothing to buy, but it's just kind of like a breezeway. You can see everything. So they go and they play in front of every section, and do a little thing, and everybody goes bananas, and where you go. I was there actually. I was there for probably one of the most famous instances of take me out to the ball game ever. So I happened to be there when Ozzy Osbourne was the guest. So this was not long after, Harry Carey had, I don't remember if Harry Carey had died or if he had retired first. But anyway, this was not long after Harry Carey had kind of walked away. And this was also at the height of the Osbournes TV show, which was kind of like, all you kids out there who don't know this was kind of like the first reality show, at least one of the first reality shows. And, Ozzy Osbourne, not American. And he came in and he Ozzy Osbourne the lines of take me out to the ball game. Like he had the first line and then everything else was just inaudible, and he got booed. It was amazing.
I don't remember who sang it at any of my visits. Nobody outstanding, but that's a really cool thing that even though Harry Carey has been gone for, geez, I don't know how long now, 20 years maybe. They continue the tradition with guest singers every seventh inning stretch. You were just talking about the neighborhood, and that's something that I wanted to mention too, is the change in the neighborhood as well. I mentioned the change in the ballpark between 2011 and 2022. The change in the neighborhood was even more astounding because, like you said, it wasn't a bad neighborhood, but it was a working class neighborhood. It wasn't like Yankee Stadium where you're kind of looking over your shoulder, but it was it was neighborhood bars, dive bars, if you want to call them. It was loaded with dive bars and mom and pop souvenir stores and everything, and it's all gone. And it has a very corporate feeling around the ballpark now that just wasn't there before. So while it may be shinier, it really has lost a lot of its feeling, at least in my opinion.
And you got to figure, like, it's amazing that this place is still running because it was the last to the party for everything, right? Like it was the last. I remember when they were only day games,
right?
In Chicago. It was the last one to have lights. And again, another fight, right? Like this is something, the neighborhood didn't want that. Didn't want that light pollution.
Have you been there for a night game?
Have I been there for a night game? I don't think I have. I think every game I've been has been an afternoon game.
I went to a night game and a day game, so I got the best of both worlds.
I don't know if I'd like a night game with that wind buzzing through there. That might the day
August,
game we went to, the wind was buzzing through there. It was miserable. One of the day games. One of them was just beautiful, sunny. It was like a postcard.
I've been lucky. I had 2 really nice days there. So
Um, question: is Wrigley Field the first corporate name?
I would say
Ish.
probably because it was named Wrigley Field after the Wrigley family pretty
Yes.
much pretty soon after it was built. Not immediately when it was built, because it
No.
was originally called something else. I can't think of it off the top of my
Oh,
head. Starts with a does it start with a W? I don't
yeah.
know.
Wise Garden, I think it was the owner who built it. It
Yeah.
was named after him.
Go to stadiumjourney.com and we'll have the answer for you
Yeah.
there.
And he ended up selling to William Wrigley Jr., who was, the Wrigley chewing gum heir, or I'm not sure how old he was at the time. Um, Weigman. It was Weigman.
Weigman, yes.
Weigman Stadium. And then it was Cubs Park for a very short period of
Like
time.
a year or two, not very long at
Six
all.
years.
Yeah.
2026. And then and then when Wrigley bought the Cubs, and this is something I'm not sure everybody knows, but the Wrigley Field is privately owned. It is owned by the Ricketts family, who also owns the Cubs. So when William Wrigley bought the team, he changed the name to Wrigley Field. It's a National Historical Monument. I don't think there is any possible way that it could ever be changed to something other than Wrigley Field. I think I think it's kind of neat in that it doesn't matter who buys it or who owns the Cubs or who owns the park or anything. If they ever renamed it, I think there'd be a riot. Like it would probably keep people away. Fenway
Interesting.
probably the same.
Yeah. You know, a question just popped into my head, and as we're recording this, news just came out last week of this isn't the same scale, but Northeastern University is going to tear down Matthews Arena, which is the oldest hockey arena that's been continuously in use in the world. It's over like 110 years old.
That'd be a really good obstructed views. Wait a minute, there
Wait a
is
minute.
one.
Yes, but anyway, my thought was that parks like Wrigley Field, Fenway Park, they've got to be coming to the end of their useful life. How do you replace a place like Wrigley Field?
Well, I think part of it is of all those renovations, I think we only see a fraction of what's happening.
Yeah.
So it's I think a lot of renovations were happening underneath with the infrastructure and the all the player
Yeah.
areas, locker rooms and player amenities, all that. You're never going to have an infrastructure like a modern ballpark that has all of the shipping options, where all your shipping just comes in under and drives underneath the under the park and goes to this loading dock, boom, 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 and you're not taking up the streets or whatever. I think you're pretty much taking up the streets at Wrigley and at Fenway, and I would assume Yankee Stadium now has some infrastructure to it.
Well, I'm sure with the new one, if that's all been resolved. But yeah,
Yeah.
you wonder how long these old parks that there would be a public outcry if they tried to replace them. But at some point, you're going to have to.
Yeah, I honestly, I'm not sure if we would ever see it in our lifetimes.
Which is fine with me.
And considering where it is, look at the Bears as a comparison, right? They are talking new stadium, but for quite a while they were talking Arlington Heights, right? So
Right.
unless you're going to, bulldoze Wrigley Field and start from scratch on that spot, there's a pretty good chance you're heading out of the city.
Yeah.
And then do you kill that whole north side, south side dynamic, which is unique to Chicago? And you got the Cubs are the north side, and that's the rich team and whatnot, and the the bad news bears are the White Sox on the south side, and that's the working man's team and whatever. So I don't think I'll ever see Wrigley Field gone, but who knows?
Who knows? Yeah, and yeah, like one of the great things about going to a Cubs game are all the traditions that they have there. We talked about the seventh inning stretch. You've got the flags, the W or the L flag that hangs outside. You got the giant manual scoreboard in center field. Um, what's that Cubs song they play after they win? Like "Go Cubs Go" or something.
Mm,
Just so many things going on. And you were talked about Gallagher Way with his statues of some Cubs legends. Fergie Jenkins is out there, and
yep.
Ron Santo, and can't think off the top
Billy
of my head who else is
Williams.
there. Yep.
I think there might just be the three,
There's four.
or is there Ryan Sandberg too?
Ryan Sandberg's out there,
Or you know what?
yes.
There's a Harry Carey one somewhere.
That's in center field. That's not in
Okay.
Gallagher Way.
Okay.
So, all right. So here we go. One last question to wrap up this show. Everybody's always comparing Wrigley and Fenway. Which do you prefer?
Whoa. I would say, to me, it's like heads or tails. They're both the same coin. They're both unique in different ways. Wrigley being known as the friendly confines, I honestly found it to be friendlier than Fenway. I found Fenway to be a little bit more precocious. Now, it could be that the Cubs were still lovable losers, I think, before or like when I went. So they hadn't won their World Series and made the big, and Boston had become exceedingly arrogant with their multiple World Series championships when I was there. So that's kind of how I would compare them. But they're really close. If I'm doing my rankings, they're really close to each other. They're probably back to back.
All right. Just for my answer, just for completion's sake, you're asking a Massachusetts boy which one he prefers. It's no contest, but if I can be as objective as possible, my answer is almost exactly the same as yours. They are two sides to me of the same coin. Both places have modernized and kept their history at the same time. It really is just your preference. Both have neighborhoods that are not what they used to be. They both been shined up, whether that's for better or for worse. So yeah, it's just what do you feel like on a certain day? Fenway gets the edge for me simply because I'm a Red Sox fan. But if you handed me 2 tickets to Wrigley Field, I would be there in a heartbeat. So it's a tie. So that's our look at Wrigley Field. Hope you enjoyed it. Glad to be back and to join you once again. Hope we see you on the road again real soon. Cheers.
Cheers.